All right, I would like to call the Monday, April 1st, 2019 Village of Lake Orion Planning Commission meeting to order. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we get a roll call on determination of quorum, please?
Chairperson Berman, Vice Chairperson Zenek, Secretary Reynolds.
Present.
Commissioner Hammond, Commissioner Loran.
Here.
Commissioner Reard.
Here.
Commissioner Sable. Commissioner Van Poortvliet.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Secretary Reynolds, we have a quorum. We have prior notice from Member Hammond that he would be unable to attend tonight and requests to be excused.
Thank you. To my fellow commissioners, we have an agenda in front of us tonight. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Any comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, approval of meeting minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of March 4th, 2019. Any comments or motion on the table I would entertain?
Move approved.
I have a motion by Van Poortvliet. Do I have a second? Second by Laurent. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. With that being said, we would move on to item number 6, public comment on non-agenda items only. See, we have a couple members of the public tonight. Do we have any comments? Seeing none, we will move forward on item number 7, old business. Item A, short-term rental ordinance review, draft text amendments. I will defer to our planning consultant to kick us off.
Thank you, and good evening, Commissioners. The memorandum you have before you regarding short-term rental ordinance review, update number 4, is a continuation of our discussion of short-term rental regulations. The language provided to you this evening is a review by the village attorney, Mary Kacharik. She has provided her comments. We've also provided comments given by residents and stakeholders, property owners in the village. The first section, the village attorney's review, covers, in the cover letter, items 1 through 6 highlight the changes Ms. Kacharik has provided in her draft ordinance based on the comments provided to her from our last discussion at the March meeting. These items do, in fact, make the ordinance more restrictive, as the Planning Commission requested at our last meeting. For example, if you'll recall, we discussed making each day a violation and a separate making each day a violation and a separate violation. This would be number 6, and Mary Kacharik has included that in her draft ordinance. We will continue to work with the village attorney to finalize the draft ordinance, but we are looking for any feedback that the Commission has this evening regarding this. We're also looking for comments from, it's an ongoing discussion with the Village Council as well as stakeholders in the community. And given that we have received several comments from residents in the community, property owners, and we have provided those letters for your review as well. Should you have any comments, we'd be happy to take those into advisement and to continue working with the village attorney to create a draft ordinance, which will ultimately, we will hold a public hearing for that. Again, we're just looking for direction on this draft, and we appreciate any feedback. Thank you.
And just as a brief overview, thank you. As of right now, the draft amendment that's before us tonight, there's still multiple steps that we would have to proceed with before anything would go into effect. One being a public hearing, correct? And then there would have to be a first and second reading at the village council level too, correct?
Yes.
Correct. And Secretary, we are at this time recommending largely more discussion on this topic, especially with the village council, who has discussed it formally and informally, just to have more direction on the direction of the ordinance should take.
Okay. And just to summarize real quick, a couple of letters that we did receive, a couple of residents, separate letters issued from residents on West Point, concerned of the 2019 rental season, since it's already upon us, about a new, I guess, ordinance that would affect their already booked guests, their season that is primarily June through August. How are these rules going to take effect, and could we entertain the idea of postponing or not having an effect the 2019 rental season? The resident of 244 West Point brought up a couple of concerns that elaborate on that. I apologize, I'm reading this again just to hit a couple of items, but I guess overall just bringing some concerns forth of short-term rental ordinance in the village. With that, since we're entertaining some discussions, I'll bring it up to some fellow planning commissioners here.
For a comment?
Yeah, please.
I have a couple regarding the ordinance. I guess I'll just go right at it as far as some things I'd like to have us consider. On Section 2 definitions, the short-term rental, right now it calls it out for terms of less than 30 days. So a short-term rental would be considered 30 days, 29 days, 28 days. So that includes anything that's 7 days or 14 days. I'm just wondering if that's too excessive as being 30 days. I was thinking it might be more of a 14-day period. But just a thought. Go ahead.
But couldn't somebody just rent it twice? I mean, would there be any significant?
That would be, twice would be a short-term rental at that point.
Right. So, I mean,
right.
What would be the difference, I guess?
I'm saying bring the number down. So it's 14 days if there's a benefit as opposed to one full month. So just bringing it out there.
Right. Yeah, I could see the question of 30 days conflicting with a month-to-month renter, which would be
correct,
different than a short-term Airbnb.
Right. And some months, in all honesty, don't make 28 or 30 days. So just a technicality, but just kind of bringing it out there. It could be 24, which covers all months. It could be another number other, and it doesn't make it a month-to-month rental, if you follow that.
And I don't recall, I'll defer to McKenna on this one, this was drafted based on a kind of general agreement or other cities that have similar agreements, correct? There's some baseline information that was pulled for this?
The village attorney actually drafted this.
Okay.
And so she, I would assume, has taken into account other communities' ordinances.
Okay. I think that's a valid point by Mr. Van Portfleet of just the definition itself. I would ask my fellow planning commissioners their comments on duration, and obviously there's multiple steps that need to be taken forth to implement this, but what is your thoughts on the timeline and how it may affect rentals for this year?
Well, if someone's got something rented now, and we put something in, I would think we would probably grandfather them at this time for this year, if it's proven that they're in fact in now.
I don't have a good answer for that. I think that because you're talking about two different things. You're talking about this duration, right? And you're also talking about current agreements that the property owners may have initiated with renters. So maybe as a point of clarification, are you talking about current agreements that somebody may have initiated that may be 30 days?
Yes, my major concern is we have multiple steps that we take forth, and the public concern initially, even prior to a public hearing, is if this gets implemented, let's say in August, and there's renters already agreed to or in action already, do we want to implement this now, or do we want to have discussion of this takes effect fall of 2019? I beside the 30-day parameter,
Right.
as another topic.
Well, for me, there's been, and Joe, you can help out with this, there has not been, what would you say, adherence to current village ordinances out there. There's been difficulties, and if those were to continue, then I just trust the situation, quite honestly. I'm in favor of enactment, and it should begin, because we've had difficult times. But this is also an ordinance for the community. So I don't want to have a bad situation, penalize everybody, if you will. But I also don't trust what may take place between now and when it does take effect. I'm concerned about that. I'd rather see more of an immediacy, because we've had things like trees cut down. We've had a number of violations done out there. Am I accurate, Joe?
There have been in the past, before my time, there had
Right.
been, yes.
And things that have just been randomly done
That's,
without any, because we haven't had, we've had ordinances, but there just hasn't been enforcement. So in past demonstration of the willingness to work with the village and properly respect some of the current guidelines, those haven't been, that has not taken place. So that's one of my concerns.
Okay. Joe?
well, one of the concerns on this whole topic that the village attorney brought up is we don't have a rental inspection ordinance for the village, period.
Right.
So that's a base right there that we should keep in mind. And it's something certainly the council will be looking at. So we're trying to put into place what the rules are going forward. The incident we've had, unfortunately, out there is all issues that can be addressed through our existing laws and ordinances under state and local ordinance. The noise and those items should be handled through the police department, whether we have a rental ordinance or not. So I think we need to understand that this isn't the only basis upon which we can deal with the issues of noise and disturbing the peace out there, whether it's golf carts going up and down the cart way too many times or loud people making noises. You call the police, whether it's a rental property or not. If you're out there disturbing the peace, you call the police, whether it's a rental or not a rental. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that. That's there today.
Right.
Whether we have this ordinance or not. The term of the date, it says less than 30 days. So it means 29 or less. So this month-to-month thing, I think the way the attorney read it, it's fine. It'd be more confusing to say it's 21 or 24. If it's less than a month, you got to comply once this is adopted. And it will become effective once it's published.
Correct.
So we go through the public hearing, we go to the first reading, the second reading, and then probably within 10 days later, it'd be adopted, and then it's actually in effect, and we can enforce it.
What would be the full length of time on it to be in effect from today?
At least 2 months.
2 months.
Approximately, yeah.
Because you got to schedule the public hearing, you have so many days to publish it, have the public hearing, then it's got to go to council. They get to have the first reading, and then the second reading a month later, basically. So there's an easy 2 months.
But wasn't a lot of the problem not just the noise, but the fact that they were taking up more parking than was available to them? So, I mean, some of this, I think, maybe we should enact, because that was part of the biggest problem that I've read in the past.
Sure.
Well, that brings up a point. For Harmony, it needs to be done relatively soon because there's residents out there that are complaining about the parking, and this addresses that as well. But I have a couple other items I'd like to mention as well.
Sure, go ahead, Ken.
Down in registration required, item A, registration required, all dwelling units used for short-term rental shall be registered with the village. The short-term rental advertisement for a rental of unregistered dwelling unit is prohibited. I'm sorry, that may not be, I wrote a note, calendar year versus a tax year payment. I'm not addressing the proper point right there. I apologize. I had a discussion just briefly a moment ago with Joe. I'll bring this back up in another moment. Item C, the number of bedrooms in dwelling unit and size and square foot of each bedroom. I'm not sure what the size of the bedroom really means. And then I thought, okay, so is somebody going to take a closet and call it a bedroom? So we know that if it says 30 square feet, we know it's not a bedroom, right?
Well, I think the description of a bedroom, it has to have a closet.
From real
That's how they actually look at it.
So
They don't have a closet, they don't call it as a bedroom.
So for ease, I thought we could put number of bedrooms must be larger than 80 square feet or something like that. The rooms must be larger to qualify. I don't know, but I just kind of didn't really get it. To me, there's a loophole in the size of square foot of each bedroom. I would assume that upon inspection, when we would enter on an annual basis, we'd look for the bedrooms, but I just thought that size of square feet kind of didn't make sense to me.
Or is it better just to honor its sleeps as opposed to bedroom? For instance, you know, I have some property at home. Of course I have. And we say, okay, you can sleep 10 nights, 3 bedrooms, but there's one bedroom is the kids, you know, you put 6 kids in it. Big room. But how many units sleep to figure that out?
So the provision of the square foot doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, because they got bunk beds in there.
Yeah.
Right.
How I read that parameter was, I totally hear everyone's concerned with it. I think, you know, every rental service or agreement parameters may have different items that are related to number of beds that you can actually advertise. And the application itself, I think it's doing exactly to the prior comment of, you know, can a closet become a bedroom, you know, relative number of beds per bedrooms that are there. So it's a information basis. So, I mean, square footage might be excessive, but I think number of bedrooms, you know, versus number of beds that are in a dwelling unit, I think is relevant, at least for just information basis. You know, we're asking for a number of parking spaces. We're asking for, you know, kind of general information of that. It's not like we're requiring that to be on the registration or on the advertisement.
Okay.
I was going to ask if what our comments were on the pricing structure that was set forth. I know it was a discussion at the last meeting for violations.
I have a couple more yet.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
Sorry.
Nope.
Item I, a statement that the property owner or a local agent will provide at least one copy of the village's good neighbor policy with address section completed to the renters. I'd like to see that signed by the renters, and they keep it, because there could be a violation. Please show up, renters say, I never saw anything, I don't know what you're talking about. So a good neighbor policy should have some type of a document follow through that when they rent, they show up, they sign the good neighbor policy that they've received it.
Okay.
Item K, the owner shall pay an administrative fee of $20. That's an administrative fee to the village, correct? Nothing happens for $20. I thought it should be $50. But I'm just saying, $20 is nothing. You know, go ahead.
I have a question, though, too. Who's going to do the inspection, and how is that being paid for?
Item L, no permit shall be issued to any owner unless that owner is current on the payment of all real property taxes, utility rates, fees, charges, special assessments, and other amounts due to the village. Delinquencies on any such payments to the village, regardless of whether they are related to the rental unit for which the rental unit shall result in a denial of the permit. I just was mentioning to Joe, our taxable, and just kind of think about this, may be important, may not. Our taxes are sent out on July 1st, payable by August 1st.
31st.
We're going to give this assignment of a permit on a calendar year of January to December. So if you didn't pay your taxes at the end of August, you're technically delinquent. So at that point, you should go into a revocation of your license. You could technically not pay those taxes in August and let them roll for how many years? But you would get caught up in January with your renewal of the annual license, but still you've operated on August, September, October, November, December for 5 additional months while being in delinquent with tax.
Well,
am I accurate?
you're correct. After August 31st, there is an additional penalty and interest payable on the account. Then the county in April or May takes it over, and it actually becomes certified delinquent, and they go after the collection when it's turned over to the county. So it's delinquent in the sense that it's getting paid principal and interest, fees, fines, and interest after August 31st. And then after April, it goes to the county, and it is definitely delinquent at the time it gets turned over to the county. So it's a question of definition, but it's a good point to bring out. What does delinquent mean?
So if it were in there to say
August 31st
shall result in denial or revocation of existing permit, that covers that base for me.
Yes.
So I might suggest that that's included or considered. And item, item E, says compliance with other ordinances. The village, towards the latter part of that, the village may inspect the dwelling unit annually to ensure it is in compliance with building codes and other regulations. I'd like to see it say the village may inspect the dwelling upon written request at a minimum of 1 time per year, because let's say that with the permitting, it's inspected in May, and then there's a consumer complaint in July. Technically, it's already been inspected. You have no right to go back on there again. But if there's a written request, you could. It's a matter of technicality, but there could be a case where someone might say, they removed the fire, smoke detectors, and they are not there. Well, we want to see that. Well, you could go there, and an owner could say, you've already inspected it for this year. You've already been here. I'm not going to allow it. Written request. That's all. It's a technicality.
The only issue I see with that is written request by who?
By the village.
Okay.
To be responded within 7 days. I mean, probably should just be tightened up a little bit. I'm just trying to look for what could possibly be difficulties in the future. Item B, revocation of registration. The village may revoke the rental registration of any dwelling unit which is the site of at least 5 separate incidences. I think 5 is still too many. I think 3. 5's a lot. That's the only comments I have in regard to the ordinance itself and the actual language.
Thank you.
For this evening.
Does anyone else have additional comments? was going to essentially entertain a motion and then open up to public comment so we can have a little direction on, so the public can understand where we're headed with this. Sorry, I'm trying to find our next step, I believe, is we need a final draft, so I guess we need some further comment of to either is the commission in agreement with the comments that Mr. Van Portfleet has brought forth tonight, because I think we need to just lock some of those down before we hold a public hearing. Is there any pushback on those comments, or?
So I think the motion you're looking for is to refer to general counsel, our counsel, for changes in text and consideration before it come back in the text changes that we just discussed. I'll make that motion.
Is that a motion? Okay.
Yes.
I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion for the time being? Okay, so to clarify, to take these comments, ask for additional comments from the village council. We're not scheduling a public hearing at this point in time, but that would potentially be a next step. Correct?
But one question,
Yep.
Commissioner Rader would ask about who's paying for the inspection. We didn't get an answer.
I guess that, yeah, I mean, the question, I would agree with that. I mean, there's some working parts to all of this. I think who and what checklist are we, I guess, having an inspection against is one of my questions. You know, is there a, housing checklist of some sorts or a safety checklist or something that would be a concern? I think I would like to see some input potentially from like the fire marshal, for example, because I think it's, for me, other than these kind of parameters of how they're being used, so there's some protection here, we're really kind of looking for life safety. So if there's an open chance that there's a building violation or, but, there's things that are, quote, grandfathered in when you aren't renovating a home. So are we going to open up to all those things that electrical is outdated if it isn't a exposed conduit? I don't think you can go in and essentially require someone to update all their electrical system, but I think a life safety concern of, maybe potentially, open wiring or something would be more of the concern we're looking at. So I think as a working item, if we could work towards what that checklist is, if we are going to require an inspection, and further define to say, on average, if $75, is that completed by a third party or is it completed by us?
What about if we were to consider doing this in that item K, which is the owner shall pay an administration fee of $20. The owner shall pay an administrative fee of $150 and includes the inspection fee.
I think that's, I'm open to that. I guess I would just want to know where are we basing that off of?
Yeah.
I think administrative fee, there's a rightful ask for that, but is it a half-hour inspection? Is it an hour inspection? Is it something that's reasonable? I think we need something to base on that. I would be open to $100, $150, what that parameter is, but,
Sure. Joe, who would conduct the inspection besides the fire department? Will it be a building official or will it be our police official?
It would just be building.
Building?
And it could be a tradesperson or not, depending on what we would want to look into. Or maybe the building official would go through and say, you need to have this further inspected.
And so if they do that, are we billed for that as well?
They should be paying that fee. That should be in our fee. It should be a rental fee, which includes inspection, because we'll want to inspect every property. And now, unless we provide a clause, unless you bring in a certified inspection signed by a building official that everything's to code, you've already taken care of. I mean, maybe we could look at doing that. But the $20 administrative fee, McKenna's going to be, someone's going to be looking over this application and reviewing and seeing compliance. So that's just the office staff. So the cost of an inspection would either be provided by or paid for by the property owner.
So I think before we can make that ruling, and I think part of the next steps of having a public hearing, I think we should be bringing forth that list of what that, what is that list of inspections, and answer the question of who is completing it. I think it could be acceptable that a building official or someone from building department staff at the township could complete, but I don't know if they're fully capable or able to do that. Based on my comment of a fee, if on average, we're saying, hey, a reasonable fee amount for this from a third-party inspector based on it being an hour is $50 or $80,
I mean,
what is that number, right?
I mean,
when you call, when someone calls the township and asks for a residential inspection,
right,
what is it, $125?
I'm not sure. We'll have to find out. Because I was going to say, most places do have inspections before you buy a house. Most smart buyers do that.
Yep.
That's a home inspector, which
home inspector, right.
Depends on whether you qualify that as a person that is, I'm a home inspector myself. I don't do it anymore, but the point is I'm not a building official, and you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have somebody looking at this that is not part of the township building department, because first of all, the building department and the township and the village, you can't really sue them for errors and omissions. And who are you going to sue if you have just a home inspector who may be more qualified but doesn't really have anything, what can I say, license or something that protects us? I think you're going to have to find out what the township would charge us, and that's the way it's going to have to be. And what's going to come out of the building inspector is going to come out, and he's going to look, and he's going to see that, hey, there's a wiring problem or whatever. They're going to tell you, well, it's going to cost you more money because now you're going to have the electrical inspector out. And I think that's the way it has to go.
Good point. They should be called out of the township building inspector.
Okay, so we have some comments here. Any other major comments before I turn over to public comment? No? Go. Okay. So at this time, we'll entertain public comment on the motion. If there is anyone here tonight that would like to speak to the discussion or the motions on the table right now. Go ahead. If you could state your name and address.
My name is Jeff Schlaffe. I'm the owner of 244 West Point. Okay. Just to kind of piggyback on the conversation of really opening Pandora's box when you have these inspections. These homes are, some of them 100 years old. So, when we have an inspection, does that basically give the inspector a license to inspect as a new property, a new build? Mm-hmm. That would be, kind of a concern, of course. Because, I think at the end of the day, we want to be safe. We're trying to be safe for our tenants or guests. However, I just don't want to open this up to the point of it's starting to not make sense.
Yep. Yep. Agreed.
That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Margaret Johnson, 571 West Point. I'm not hearing everything. My hearing's a little bad, so I didn't get the whole discussion. Sorry. So I'm going to go. All I'm going to state is I don't want to go into a lot of history of what's gone on. We all know. I'm just going to speak on the behalf of this short-term Airbnb thing. I am not in favor of it. I've been very vocal about that. It's nothing personal against anybody. I just we are in a neighborhood. We are family there, and we do have children there. Unfortunately, I am a single person in a house by myself, and I have strangers going by. I'd be more comfortable with a renter that I get to know, whether I like them or not. But when I have, and I'm not saying that the people that are coming down there renting short-term are bad people. I'm not saying that at all. But I don't know them. And my fault, and I spoke to Joe about this, yes, should I be calling and complaining? I'm at fault. I'm not doing it. Partly out of respect to the neighbor, but it's going to stop because I am tired of whether it's a four-wheeler or it's a golf cart going up and down 10, 12, 15, 20 times a day, even at nighttime. And once again, I know they're not there, but the point is, whether they've been told, the person's been told or not, they're doing it. I don't want to call the police at 10, 11 o'clock at night because I have to get up and go to work by 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not going to sit and wait for an officer to come and file my complaint and then get to bed 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever time. But once again, Airbnb, it doesn't belong in the village. It doesn't belong in a family environment with children. I'm sorry, that's how I feel. So, I'm willing to work with whatever the village decides. But I do think in my particular situation, something needs to be done about the traffic. Once again, I really didn't want to get too much into that. There are a lot of people that are complaining about it, a lot of people that are not here. And believe me, I will make sure they will be at the public hearing on this. But I would just wish you'd take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's nothing personal against anybody. It's just, this is my home. Mm-hmm. And I don't like all these people coming up and down that I don't know. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, that being said, there is a motion and a second on the table. We appreciate the discussion. This obviously is, we're not taking this lightly, and there's a lot of discussions and continued discussion to be had on this topic, which is exactly why we're not just pushing this through. We want some comment from the council to then come back and then schedule our public hearing so our draft amendment can be buttoned up tight. And even with that being said, there's going to be additional opportunity for public comment, and then there'll be additional readings, a first and a second reading at the Village Planning Commission level. So it seems like there's some additional comments. Is there any other comments put forth by the commission here tonight? All right, that being said, we don't do a formal roll call here, right? We just do all those in favor, right?
Do you want a roll call?
Sure. Let's do a roll call, please.
Okay, let's see who's here. Reynolds.
Yes.
Sorry. Loran?
Yes.
Greer?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, couldn't hear. Van Forfleet?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. With that said, so that will circle back to us. Moving on to item 7B, downtown Lake Orion dumpster enclosure discussion. This is an item that's coming back forth to us tonight. It looks like we have some additional information from other cities to take a look at ordinances. We got some maps. So with that, I'll defer to McKenna for a brief overview of where we're at today.
Thank you, Commissioner Reynolds.
Oh, sorry. If you guys would like to stick around, you're welcome to. If you'd like to take off and leave, we've got a couple more agenda items, but you're dismissed. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Good comment.
All right, with that, we'll resume. McKenna, can we have some comment here, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reynolds. As you stated, this is also a follow-up from previous discussions. Our waste ordinance review and recommendations update number 4 is presented for your review. This memo is broken into 3 sections for ease and clarity. Part A is existing conditions. Part B is the zoning ordinance comparison review. And Part C is a draft ordinance, draft zoning ordinance review. And why are waste regulations important? We've been talking about enclosure regulations and centralization for a while now. Particularly in the, we've been focusing on downtown Lake Orion. And based on our site visits and what we've come to see in the village, these are all applicable and directly related to refuse containers and enclosures in the village. And we feel that these regulations will improve parking, placemaking, walkability, the ease of circulation and access, safety, and most noticeably, beautification of the downtown. Part A on page 27 gets into the existing conditions. We've done a more thorough review. We've provided an extensive chart for your review with pictures and photographs of existing conditions.
Is that in this report?
It is. It should be continued.
It's right there. I mean, it is. It's not loading on the iPads for the record's sake. And
it doesn't
directly online. But.
It doesn't directly follow Part A. It is at the end. It was an attachment to the end. As we've shown you before. Oh, is it not on there?
It's the last click on the last attachment, because they went in as individual attachments.
Right. Yep, it should follow the memo.
I was just going to pull it up. If you go through the app, it does load. If you pull it up online, it does not.
And I can share my copy if you need one.
That right here. Thank you. Does everyone see it at this point? Okay. Go ahead. Continue. Thank you.
Oh, you got the letter.
It's not loading on the iPad via the website. It loads via the app on the iPad. So,
okay.
So that's
we'll keep that in mind. We tried to make it as small as possible for the file size, but
it is visible. Thank you.
But on the iPad, so probably I might not.
It was a big document. I apologize for that. Enclosed in the existing conditions report is Exhibit A, which is North Downtown Lake Orion, and Exhibit B, South Downtown Lake Orion. And that's just to distinguish the areas so we can have some clarity in our discussion. As we've shown before, we've separated downtown into quadrants. And the letters indicated on each exhibit do point out the existing refuse enclosure and receptacle locations throughout the downtown. We've also, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This is largely to show you the progress that we've made so far. There are some discussions that we'd like to have with village administration and the Downtown Development Authority Director, Molly Lalone. Based on what we found here in the existing conditions, we'd like to have a conversation with them regarding current and future, just future situations and anticipating what might happen with refuse, and also answer some questions that we still have. As well as, we'd also like to prepare, at our previous meeting, you had requested a further study of an expanded commercial district, refuse and receptacle locations. And we are looking at further south on the South Broadway corridor at other commercial properties and the existing conditions with those as well. So we will be preparing that report likely for our May meeting as well. What I would like to focus on and kind of pivot to, if you would let me, is Part B, which is the zoning ordinance comparison. Within the ordinance comparison, we have looked at several comparison communities, City of Northville, Royal Oak, Rochester, Ann Arbor, the Village of Oxford. We also looked at the City of Birmingham. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of information there to note, so we did not include that in the table. And then Part C is a draft of the zoning ordinance, which we have revised according to the comparison review. We specifically looked at location and placement, enclosure design standards, site plan requirements, which the Planning Commission would obviously take part in, other regulations that the ordinances include, such as pickups, and then just general requirements. The items that are highlighted in green, they're also bolded, are items that we felt were outstanding in the ordinances, in which we could directly relate to the village's ordinance, which then we did add or somehow incorporated into the village's ordinance, based on our findings here and common best practices. And one such best practice that I want to pay attention to, and I want to particularly draw your attention to, is the material and the material standards for enclosures. It was of particular interest to the village administration, in which we would like some specific direction and have some conversation about this evening. Currently, the recommendation for enclosure materials, and I'm sorry, I'm referring to page 31, and this would be section B, would be number 2, the type, color, and pattern of enclosure materials to match and complement the exterior facade of the principal buildings. And also in number 1 with waste receptacles shall be completely enclosed and secured by a decorative masonry screen on 3 sides with lockable gates. So I would like the Commission's, particularly the Commission's point of view on that, to have some discussion regarding materials of enclosures. And that's where I'd like to start. If you have any other questions regarding the review or the draft ordinance, we'd be happy to discuss and then take it back to our office for further review. And just for clarification, the village attorney has not reviewed this draft ordinance as of this moment. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that overview. I will kick off with a couple of things. I appreciate the second exhibit that compares ourselves to other cities, because I think that's, in my perspective, some of our zoning parameters were a little outdated, let's say. And with, things looking at parking and things, not that it isn't a solution, but I think there's a way to be a little more forward-thinking and communal-based or contributing towards the walkability. Because I know that there's projects when you have a zero setback, some of the big driving factors to our developments right now is trash. And I think it could lend to either better or smarter or better laid out developments based on being a little more open to communal or some of those other parameters. And I think it's important for the village to help take the lead. So I appreciate the comment of having some more discussion from village administration and staff. I think that's important because if we could identify, locations or designated areas moving forward that we had lent to that, I think that's great. And there's cities like Ferndale where the city has taken the charge, and it's not something, you're required to handle trash to a certain point, and then, or are you storing it inside and then you take it to the communal compactor, or something that lends to that language. And real quick, maybe my last comment before I turn it over to fellow planning commissioners would be is the materials. In my experience, obviously a lasting or durable surface is desirable. Masonry obviously does that nicely, but there's been some recent developments out on the market, and I'll just tag one company specifically that we've installed is Cityscapes, and they're pre-manufactured architectural solutions. They're either made out of metal or durable siding materials, and they're kind of a prefab structure, and it's a way to take, be adaptable to closer quarters. It's a little more budget friendly, but it looks very nice and has is a lasting solution. So I think, carefully describing materials in a way to say, it's not something that's temporary, that's going to be there for a while, but it doesn't have to be masonry. And that's something that's kind of new in my thinking process. But with that, enough me talking. I'll open up to my fellow planning commissioners.
So I agree with that, materials, because if you take a look at a lot of places where it's already asphalt, who's going to want to pay the money to put a footing in, where you could just put posts in, which is a better way, especially, like I say, a lot of these older buildings. The second thing I also noticed was that 10-foot, concrete apron. Well, the same scenario, you already have asphalt there. Are you going to tear the asphalt out to put concrete in? Yeah, it's probably a better solution, but as long as it's not causing a problem. And the main thing is not just what they're built out of, but that we, through our code enforcement, make sure that people maintain things. That's the same thing, like I say, on this board, how many times did I mention Leo's? And I eat at Leo's all the time, but it's not well maintained most of the time. So I think the more important thing is that we find a way to make people maintain what they put in.
Yep. Joe?
I agree with having masonry mandated is not in our best interest, because one of our problems you mentioned about maintenance, well, there's a lot of existing dumpster enclosures that if we had options we could suggest to them.
Right.
Well, right now we really can't do anything. If they're there and they're not maintained and they don't have doors on them, we can deal with it. But having alternatives, especially in the new technology, wood should say wood or composite material. Because really don't want wood, because wood has a lot of maintenance costs.
Durable surface, there's other keywords that could be used there. Yeah, I think there should be some expectation managed, because if you leave it too open, there's conditions where it's like, hey, when you don't think out dumpster enclosures, then you run into issues of they place it on the asphalt's too thin, it cracks up, it's bubbling, you can tell exactly where the truck goes and picks up the dumpster, every single time it goes and receives and changes it out. So
one thing that we did add in this draft on item D, site plan approval, is to be reviewed by the DDA director with compliance with architectural and design standards. That's something that we don't have now. That could help make sure that we get and keep our historic character and charm and attractiveness.
To Joe's point, that's very good, but there are other solutions that's not in this area. As you go down the corridor, which I didn't see here, are we going to add corridor to this?
That was one of our comments, is it's additional report we'll likely see next month.
Because, there's I love all your pictures and how It looked, the only thing I'm sad is you didn't get the side of CJ's, but other than that.
She got it nicely.
Oh, did you?
It wasn't trash day when all the photos were taken, so.
Yeah, but it wasn't. But I think, to Robert's point, the reinforcement, and you know what, you can have the nicest one in the world, all built with great doors, and if they don't close the doors,
Right.
Yep, maintenance is.
doesn't serve the purpose.
Yep. Ken?
A couple comments about the draft zoning ordinance on item B, enclosure sign design standards. Item 1, it said opaque and lockable gates, but it doesn't really, and I saw the pictures are paneled from view. It doesn't really say that a lockable gate could be a cyclone gate. It's just some technicality. I think it should be properly described in the ordinance, because you want, they took out the word wooden, which I'm in favor of, but it should be like that there is a panel in the picture. It's solid, not a see-through.
Yeah. You don't want screening, do you?
No, I want it paneled. Yeah, I want it obscured from view, the actual dumpster itself. So it just doesn't address it, that's all. Item 2, the type, color, and pattern materials of the principal building. My understanding is that we're looking to consolidate, and there may not be a building by some of these.
Right.
So by a principal building or to appropriate design standards set by this ordinance, wherever it may be.
Yeah.
And again, these are just kind of little house clean things. Item C, location and placement. Refuse recycle receptacle shall be located in a side or rear yard to minimize visibility. And there should be a statement about odors in there for adjacent properties, because you can put it in the wrong place that someone's going to smell it with an open window, especially when you're bordering residential in some areas. So I just think odors or something of the smell nature should be inserted in there. Item D, site plan approval. Item 2, enclosures located within a DDA district shall be reviewed by a DDA director for compliance with architectural design standards. I would like to see that say shall be reviewed by a DDA director. That's great. And approved by the village for compliance and architectural and design standards. Because I think what you're saying is the DDA director could approve the architectural and design standards, and I'm just not sure of the next director we may have, of the qualifications. I think it should be approved by the village. They can come back and recommend that it meets the standards, and then it gets approved by the village, but I don't think they should have that authority or their responsibility.
Yeah, I didn't take it as an approval. I took it as a, we're asking for a letter of a design intent, there's just like a fire marshal would say, review, comments are denied, and based on the following items
Well, I've already had cases where some interpretations can happen, and it's like, well, I get to do the approval. Well, anyways, okay, a letter of intent by the DDA director to provide a letter of the village or whatever of approval. Just call it out is all. And then, isn't the intent, when I looked at the map, it's got a number of placements of all the dumpsters here. Isn't the intent really to try to eliminate quite a few of those?
Correct. I would agree with that.
Right. Okay.
So I'd like to, I want to give Robert a chance to comment, and then because there's some there you brought up a number of items to discuss.
Just one last one,
Yep.
if I could, before I forget.
Yep.
Is there was a mentioning about enforcement. Well, I believe there should be an enforcement, and I'm not sure if it should follow in here as well in the ordinance, but what about people that put stuff in those dumpsters that shouldn't be putting them in there? Because that happens quite often, too.
Yep.
Should that be something that's addressed outside this ordinance or in this ordinance? I believe it should be in this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert.
Okay, I can understand a new construction where we can determine that the dumpster can go in a certain spot. But when you start stipulating that, well, it might be too much odor for this area, or somebody still can see it where I'm putting it. I think you got to watch that. You can make that administrative maybe, but as far as just putting firm rules down, you go downtown and there's going to be a lot of places it's just not going to work under strict rules. So if you want to make it administrative, that's one thing, but to put a rule that maybe a lot of people aren't going to be able to, what are they going to do, come there and ask for a variance where they put their dumpster?
Yeah. I have a comment, and then I would agree with the location comment. I mean, it can be a slippery slope with all of these. My, I guess, ask to some of our administration in McKenna from myself as a planning commissioner is I would rather see with location and placement to be something that is first considered to maybe address a communal location identified by the village of Lake Orion first. And if that isn't an opportune condition, to then consider the following, and because I think the goal is to move this towards community-based, and reduce the number of dumpsters, and that may not mean it's always on, one village property, but, we can work through those parameters. But how do you set that tone to say the real intent is to improve trash, not add to it? Because let's face it, to your point, a CJ's or whatever, we're already working with so many parameters. Where are you going to put a dumpster enclosure? We know you're not going to put one on it unless they're going to share with Dia or Caruso or whoever might be there, which is why they have 8 rollable trash bins. So I think that would be one comment that I would add to that, and then I'll circle back to the design standards after there's, Hank, you had a comment?
I'm assuming, and maybe wrong, that however we get this community dumpster, that we'll have one contract for that group.
So we have now.
Is that what we
already have that.
For downtown?
For the village dumpster.
For the village, except if it's a private dumpster.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a few exceptions.
Well, there's a few, of course.
Okay, so we have it now. Do we dictate when they will pick up?
Based on what their fees are, yes. We tell, yeah.
Day, time of day?
Yes,
So
the
that we
day.
don't have dump trucks running up and down?
Right, we set the date.
Okay.
Except at 4 or 5 in the morning. The one that echoes up Broadway Street last year. We got it fixed though. Like right now, Monday and Thursday, they pick up garbage downtown.
Before a certain time of day?
Usually in the morning, but it depends on their schedule. Monday especially is a problem because we do the regular garbage collection Monday.
Well, I just think that's a piece in there that we should add so that we don't have garbage. Let's say the downtown opens at, pick a time, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, that we're done with that before downtown really starts
open. Right, which they would normally want to get in because of parking lots. A lot of cases are in parking lots, so. Yes, like in Oxford, they pick them up Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and in the summer, Saturday. And they do it first thing in the morning. Normal.
So I think an item to consider.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Such as simple as should not be picked up after 10 a.m. and not on Sundays.
I have a comment based on the design review, and I think it's something to refine, and maybe we can get some discussion going with our current director and maybe the DDA. I think it's more important to set forth a maybe design parameter or design intent and have it maybe 1 or 2 pages and show some examples and say that's what this is, so it's not subjective to one individual. But rather, is it reviewed against? And I think that's something, from my perspective, that this Planning Commission could still do. I would welcome comment from the DDA especially if there's DDA funds or anything being utilized. But I think a one-pager that outlines 8 attributes or 6 items, lasting materials, a brick or, color-through materials, a stone cap. Doesn't have to have all those, but it has to kind of follow that intent would be a better way to take that. So some good discussion. Any other big comments with this that's brought forth tonight?
just in that design standards, I didn't see the need for a statement here about drainage, but although I did see in some of the comparison information in other communities in item B that they would have some type of a drainage so that it could drain down into the bottom of the area where it's up was kept, so it's just not like a grease trap type thing.
Okay.
I believe that's what they do nowadays in some of the, and it doesn't allow animals to get in there, but I did notice where it says it should be and can be hosed out with fresh water when necessary. And in some of the placements, there may not be water available.
Right.
But just design considerations.
Yeah.
Which in that case, we could still work with it because the DDA could bring by a water truck.
Mm-hmm.
We have a power washer, which we use to clean off grease that was
Or
spilled.
DPW, I'm sorry, DPW.
Do they currently,
Okay.
the trash hauls, do they currently pull any of those out, clean them, and put them back?
No. No.
DPW cleans our dumpster enclosures out. I do know that. And if there's an issue with the private ones, we let the owners know because we have had issues. So they are clean as needed.
One other comment, and then we'll hopefully kind of close this out, would encourage some of the existing documentation to occur on both a Sunday evening going into a Monday, even like a Monday morning. There are some businesses that are in the peripheral that are actually utilizing some of the residential pickup, or there's some crossover. And then I think that alludes to kind of that light commercial side, of, for example, like the DDA and some buildings like that. And then would also encourage some of these ticks on the map to take a look at on a Wednesday how some things are addressed. We do have certain businesses that aren't really utilizing enclosures of any sorts. So I think it's just, we need to broaden it a little bit to say how do we pick up the loose stuff that's on the corner of Broadway and Front Street, or there's conditions of that occur, and especially those influx days. So, any other comments? Do I have a motion to receive and file?
So, someone.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Are we going to receive them? We're going to sit back for further.
Okay.
Or not?
Do you need a motion to receive and file, or I guess to consider further review? I thought we were going to receive additional drafts.
So okay, that's what the motion means.
That's what Any other comments? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. All right, moving on to our almost last agenda item, McKenna's monthly report for March 2019 under new business. Can you give us a brief overview of a couple of the new items so we're aware everyone saw this report, so they should be familiar with it?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. This is a copy of our Planning and Zoning Services report for March 2019. March was a busy month for building permits. We saw 4 during the month, which is more than half of the total, which is 7 for year to date. Also of note, there is some interest in being the planning and zoning coordinator for the village. I do accept the applications when I'm in the office for office hours, and there is some interest in the for fence permits this time of year. Those we are seeing an increase in intake. We had one come in for March, but as they come in, I do notify them that the Village Council is hearing the draft ordinance that this body approved and recommended for adoption by the Village Council. And we do have those that are waiting on a fence permit are being told about that, and many have chosen to see how those discussions with the Village Council go. So we will likely see also an increase in fence permits as the summer goes on. We've also provided a summary of the planning and zoning activity based on our planning commission discussions. And this gives an overview of the discussion previously and through the last meeting, and an update for each one. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any, go ahead.
In some of these cases, how long does the permit request stay active before it gets taken off of this list?
We do have a couple that have been on the list for some time. I don't think any have quite reached the year mark. That's when I would pretty much say, and I can check with the village's ordinance. I'm not sure that it specifies how long, a year, how long a permit is good for. But I would like to reach out to these applicants again to see what the status is. Especially with the fence permits, now that potentially the ordinance could be changing, I think they would like to follow up on their applications. So I could reach out. I will reach out to them again to see where they're at with their status.
Yeah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 1 year for site plan approval and 1 year for building permit application, and you can request an extension on one, not both. But that just jogs my memory.
Thank you.
I might have read it once or twice. Any other comments on the report provided to us tonight? Thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Do I have support?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, with that, I will move towards closing the meeting out. Number 9, Commissioners' comments on planning and zoning matters. Ken, we'll start with you.
I have none, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Were you going to bring up about the TIF Plan Update Review Committee? The candidates that Molly talked about it, having a representative of the Planning Commission on the interviewing of the 3 proposals that they received for updating the TIF plan?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't get any, I wasn't going to, so thank you. I was in limbo with that one. I didn't know if that's scheduled or not. Is it? Are we actually doing that?
We're speaking if someone on the board, Planning Commission would be interested in serving on the interview panel for the 3 application proposals we received.
We can bring that up for discussion points. So the DDA is looking for a committee and a recommending body to help review applications for the consultant who will help renew the TIF extension, right? Is that accurate statement here?
For new development plan.
And they're asking for a representative from the Planning Commission. I will say this, that I've been asked if I could attend that meeting already, so I didn't know if it was a formal process or not. And I know that I think there was both a point to have a planning commissioner and a design committee member in their thing, and I'm also a design committee member. So if there's other interest, I'm sure they'll entertain additional feedback and comment if someone else would like to be a part of that. I've already been voluntold. So I would be happy to fulfill that position, but I guess I'm saying I also fulfill another one. There can be the double dip, but if there's someone else who would like to be.
Who's putting that committee together?
Molly is. There'll also be a council representative also.
I was going to say, I didn't do that. But.
Sorry, I'm not familiar, I guess, with all of the parameters. Just for the sake of planning commission, there was one. So. Do we need a formal motion, I guess, on that topic?
No.
Okay. So I will attend and report back, I guess. So I think that's going to be in the next week or so. I have no additional comments. The next regular Planning Commission meeting is Monday, May 6, 2019 at 7:30. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a support? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.